to this week's episode of Inspired Earth. I'm super excited to bring you this week's episode. I had been looking through the news, trying to find stories to talk about this week, and I had all these stories saved, and then in the last 24 hours, just so much has happened in the last 24 hours. It's incredible. I mean, the majority of the show is going to be over basically what has happened just in the last couple hours. A lot of the stuff I had saved earlier in the week just didn't make the cut. I have some of it, but this stuff is just so incredible. So before we get started, I have some art that I had done here for the podcast talking about the Amazon and jungle, and I have a lot of other art that I'm going to be posting on Instagram and Facebook you can check out, and I'm on Twitter and all the social media, so be sure to check that out and link up with the social media and like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. All right, so let's dive into this week's episode here. So we have the 9th continent, and I'm sure some of you guys are like, what? There's only 7 continents normally, right? Typically, you learn in school there's only 7 continents. Well, this is the 9th, and I'll give you the 8th in just a second. But while Atlantis, a fabled continent said to have been swallowed by the sea, continues to elude its seekers, we have found a new continent, the remnants of Argoland, a 155 million year old continent that once stretched as wide as the United States, recently located throughout the Indian Ocean and Southeast Asia. And finding Argoland was providing a struggle, and they had just recently found it. I think it was literally on land is where they had found it, but Argoland is believed to have broken off from Australia during the late Jurassic period, when Brachiosauruses and Stegosauruses roamed the earth. I'm sorry for my dinosaur pronunciation. I'm not that greatest at dinosaur pronunciation, but I will try to get by. Over the millennia, it then drifted towards Southeast Asia before eventually disappearing. So a whole continent just disappeared off of like the face of the planet, which is, hard to imagine what all had happened on that continent, and it just went away. We were never able to find it until just recently. Researchers have long suspected the continent existed, as evidenced by the void or basin left behind known as the Argo Abysmal Plain, but no remnants of such landmass has ever been found up until now. If continents can dive into the mantle and disappear entirely without leaving geological trace at the Earth's surface, then we wouldn't have much of an idea of what happened in Earth's geologic past. However, finally, the continent's rocky crumbs have been spotted. Dutch geologists detected traces of the lost landmass in tectonic megaunits, which are scattered on the ocean floor and embedded within small islands. Part of the continent extended over 3,000 miles at one point, which is massive. It's a very long way. It was hidden beneath the jungles of Indonesia and Myanmar. Wow. That's just incredible. Other lost continents underwent similar processes, including Zealandia, a submerged mass near Australia, and Greater Adria, a continent once located in the Mediterranean Sea. So that is the 8th continent that I will just briefly talk about. This was October 10th, 2023, and the previous one we were just talking about was October 28th, 2023. So both of these happened recently, but the lost continent on ocean floor I think was a little bit more recent, and we've got a lot going on the ocean floor. Lost civilizations, it's just happening everywhere all the time. So let's talk about Zealandia really quickly, the 8th continent, since I had mentioned it, and that was Earth's hidden supercontinent Zealandia was a hidden continent torn from supercontinent Gondwana in the flood of fire 100 million years ago. That sounds pretty intense. The lost continent of Zealandia, which includes New Zealand and French islands of New Catalonia, had been mapped out in a world's first, providing scientists new understanding of how it formed tens of millions of years ago. So I won't go into a whole lot of that because that one is a little bit older. But 2 new continents found, or I guess old continents found, but new to us. So here we have scientists working to explain superstructures on the ocean floor. And this does appear to be natural. The first thing I hear when I hear superstructures is obviously something man-made, but it does appear to be natural, according to the scientists. Massive superstructures of igneous rock, which is just lava, cooled lava is what they're talking about, lurking below the surface of the Pacific Ocean east of the Solomon Islands. The structure, dubbed Melanesian Border Plateau, which stretched across an area of 1,000 by 200 miles, is suspected to have formed around 100 million years ago and is still growing to this day. It originally formed during the Cretaceous period, marked by pulses of volcanic action which remain poorly understood, which is mainly the topic of this right here, is how little we understood of the volcanism that led to the creation of all of these continents that just disappear and appear, and it's bizarre. 4 distinct episodes of volcanism that make it markedly different from one another from other major structures were result of just one episode. Wow. And the effects of these episodes can have devastating effects on the climate. A lot of the mass extinctions have occurred because of volcanism. Permian extinction, for example. But it seems that was not the case for the Melanesian Border Plateau, where layers of igneous rock appeared to have built over extended periods. So this is pulses of volcanism. And that some parts of the Pacific Basin were built in a very large, massive single event, which is hard to imagine. But these were created by multiple pulses over tens of millions of years that would not have had a significant environmental impact. And that as we continue to explore the oceans, there will be other ocean mid-plate superstructures that may have more complexity. He thinks that we're going to find more complexity in that. So that's just fascinating. If we can determine how it went out, then we can determine how it went back in, hopefully. And this is just putting pieces of the puzzle back together, because we don't really know what happened with all of this. And I feel like that's what this is showing, is that history and all these scientists, that's the point of science, is proving what's wrong or what's right, what's wrong and right, and moving forward from that. And the fact is, a lot of people will say that we have a very specific information in the past, and in some cases we do, but in a lot of cases we don't. And regarding volcanism and the land that we stand on, we don't understand that, which is fascinating. But a lot of people will try to say that we do understand it, and I just don't think that we do. And a lot of the stuff in this this episode is going to be examples of that, of a lot of stuff that just happened in the last 24 hours, of the fact that we don't understand millions of years of the Earth's history, even though some of the most recent stuff, let alone going back really far into the past. Here we have huge ancient city lost found in the Amazon. This is just spectacular. This is like one of those articles, one of those discoveries that, like, really boggles my mind. I'm going to go to sleep thinking about this. I'm going to dream about this. I'm going to wake up thinking about this. I mean, this is just one of those. Okay, I'm just going to get into it. A huge ancient city has been found in the Amazon, hidden for thousands of years by lush vegetation. The discovery changes what we know about the history of the people living in the Amazon. The houses and plazas in the Upano area in eastern Ecuador were connected by an astounding network of roads and canals. The area lies in a shadow of a volcano that created rich local soils but may have led to the destruction of the society. While we know about cities in the highlands of South America like Machu Picchu in Peru, it was believed that people only lived nomadically or in tiny settlements in the Amazon. This is older than any other site we know in the Amazon. We have a Eurocentric view of civilization, but this shows we have to change our idea about what is culture and what is civilization, says Professor Stephen Rostein, Director of Investigation of the Natural Center for Scientific Research in France, who led the research. And I was wondering why France had such heavy coverage over this topic, but the fact that they had the Scientific Research Institute working on it from France, that makes sense now. Why they had that over there. It changes the way we see Amazon cultures. Most people picture small groups, probably naked, living in huts and clearing land. This shows ancient people living in complicated urban societies. I'm just, once again, cannot emphasize enough how game-changing this is, how amazingly tantalizing this is. The city was built over 2,500 years ago, and people lived there for up to 1,000 years. It is difficult to estimate how many people live there, but certain estimates are around tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in this one particular spot in a valley in the Amazon that we just now discovered. Over 6,000 rectangular platforms discovered with LiDAR technology. That's like a laser. So they're shooting lasers basically like into the ground, measuring 20 meters by 10 meters and 2 to 3 meters high. They were arranged in groups of 3 to 6 units around a plaza with a central platform. Wow. So you can tell that by the fact that they had a plaza and that they were arranging their buildings around the plaza, that this is extremely social civilization. This is about trade, exchanging information and ideas and materials. Everything about this screams extremely advanced society working together. The scientists believe many were homes, but some were for ceremonial purposes. One complex at Quilomope included a 140 meter by 40 meter platform. They were built by cutting into hills and creating a platform of the earth on the top. So, kind of like Machu Picchu, as it already stated, you can imagine these big hills and valleys, and then they're gonna kind of terrace it, I would imagine, a little bit, where they flatten out the top and then make the platform and build on top of that, and then you can have these roads coming beside it. And the roads, they said, a network of straight roads and paths connecting many of the platforms, including that extended 16 miles. They said the roads were the most striking part of the research. The road network is very sophisticated. It extends over a vast distance. Everything is connected, and there are right angles, which is impressive. He says, explaining that it is much harder to build a straight road than one that fits with the landscape. He believes some had very powerful meanings, perhaps linked to ceremony or beliefs. Scientists also identified causeways with ditches on either side, which they believed were canals to help manage the abundant water in the region. So they were even managing the water. I mean, we can barely do that. Nowadays, some places don't even try to. That was, I mean, it's extremely sophisticated, as they were saying. Where was I here? Researchers had seen that there may have been signs of threats to societies. Some ditches blocked entrances to settlements and may have been evidence of threats. So they're saying that they used natural rain to create moats for barriers and defense. They utilized the natural water to use that in a defensive tactic to defend their city states. Well, we don't. I would imagine this is a little bit of a city state. It sounds very connected. So, researchers first found evidence of a city in the 70s, but this is the first comprehensive survey that has been completed after 25 years of research. It reveals a large complex of society that appears to be even bigger than the Mayan societies. So, that's what I'm saying. This is huge. This is massive. Bigger than the Mayans. Bigger than the Inca. Bigger than everybody. More advanced than them all. Imagine that you discovered another civilization like the Maya, but completely different architecture, land use, ceramics, says Jose Iriarte, a professor of archaeology at University of Exeter. Some of the buildings are unique for South America, pointing to octagonal and rectangular platforms arranged together, which to me kind of sounds like a beehive, which once again is reflective of how intricately this society was working together. The fact that we could compare their architecture to a beehive, these guys were working together. They knew how to survive in the jungle. I will probably go on some more about that. These societies were clearly organized, well organized and interconnected, highlighting the long sunken roads between settlements. Not a huge amount is known about the people who lived here and what their societies were like. This is a huge mystery. This is so cool. Pits and hearths were found in the platforms, as well as jars, stones, and plants ground with burnt seeds. The Quilomope and Upano people lived here, probably mostly focused on agriculture, ate maize, corn, sweet potato, and drank a type of sweet beer. Professor Rostein says he was warned. Okay, this part gets pretty crazy. Professor Rostein says he was warned against the research at the start of his career because scientists believed no ancient groups had lived in the Amazon, which we know is completely false at this point. Just completely false. The Amazon was built by people, and I mean built in the truest word, in the sense of the word. It was constructed. The Amazon was constructed by people. And what I mean by that is that we have found out that not only was the arrangement of the plants a pattern, but the ground, the soil that they were growing the plants in was also manufactured and constructed. And that's called terraforming, or I can't remember it right now. Terra something from the Amazon. It'll be easy to look up. Amazonian soil, black. It's called black soil, Amazonian black soil. That's like the non traditional way of saying it. But they created that soil with microbes. They had an understanding of bacteria, that they could culture bacteria and put it and manufacture this soil to have very particular properties that they wanted. And they created a lush, I would say, utopian society where food literally just grew everywhere. Everywhere is food. And they have all these roads going through it. And we'll talk more about the soil microbes here in a little bit, but I wanted to mention that the Amazon has been constructed, and we're starting to find that out very specifically. And he was warned that no people lived there. That's just really, really weird. And we keep on hearing that over and over. All these scientists specifically in South America, keep on getting warned off, and they go anyways, and they find gold. And thank God they go. And he said, I'm very stubborn, so I did it anyway. Now I must admit, I'm quite happy to have made a discovery. The next step for researchers is understanding what lies in an adjoining 300 square mile or square kilometer area not yet surveyed. And that was in Ecuador, like I said. And we have some more information here from Detroit News. It was a valley of lost cities, says Rostein. The settlement was occupied around 500 BC and 300 to 600 AD, a period roughly contemporaneous with the Roman Empire in Europe. So these people were basically on par with Europe, if not more advanced. Residential and ceremonial buildings, more than 6,000 earthen mounds, agricultural fields with drainage canals. We already talked about that. And then here, they're estimating at least 30,000 people living there. And then, or 10 to 30,000 people. And it says that that's comparable to the estimated population of Roman-era London, Britain's largest city. Shows a very dense population, extremely complicated society, University of Florida archaeologist Michael Heckenberger, who is not involved in the study. For its region, it's really in a class of its own for how early it is, which is just incredible. Absolutely incredible. And that it would have taken organized labor to build these roads, thousands and thousands of earthen mounds. The Inca and Maya built with stone, but the Amazonia didn't typically build with stone because there's not a lot of stone in the Amazon. So they built with mud, which is an immense amount of labor. The Amazon is often thought of as a pristine wilderness with only small groups of people, but recent discoveries have shown us how more complex the past really is. Scientists have recently also found evidence of intricate rainforest societies that predated European contact elsewhere in the Amazon, including Bolivia and Brazil. There's always been an incredible diversity of people and settlements in the Amazon, not only one way to live, which is absolutely incredible. Okay, so before I go on to this one, I just wanted to reference again the black soil that the Amazon knew about with the microbes. Okay, think about that, and then we're going to move on to this next one. New dirt-fueled power source that can last forever based on 113-year-old technology. Scientists have developed a soil-powered fuel cell that can provide endless amounts of electricity from dirt. A fuel cell has been developed. The soil-powered technology that harvests energy from microbes gives a potentially sustainable alternative to traditional batteries, which contain toxic and flammable chemicals. It's based on a form of getting electricity that was used in 1911. A Northwestern University led a team of researchers in the United States who made a new fuel cell. It's about the size of a paper book and can say the electricity could be used in agriculture and green infrastructure. In a test, the fuel cells were able to detect touch, which is useful tracking animals and measure soil moisture. They were able to transmit data via an antenna using radio frequency signals. Not only did the fuel cell work in both wet and dry conditions, but its power outlasted similar technologies 120%. These microbes are ubiquitous. They live everywhere. Back in 1911, soil-based microbial fuels were the first used and operated like a battery with an anode, cathode, and electrolyte. The MFCs used bacteria rather than chemicals to generate electricity, and this bacteria naturally donates electrons to conductors. When the electrons flow from the anode to the cathode, then an electrical circuit is created. So that is fascinating. No doubt about it. I can't wait to see more technology like that in the future. However, I also have to wonder if the native people of the Amazon could create a microbial paradise to make their food and transfer, basically terraform the whole thing, because they used to think that it was a desert before they, we're going to say terraformed, before the natives terraformed the Amazon. It was a jungle, and they did that with microbial dirt. So let's just think for a second here that if they had an understanding of microbial dirt back then, who's to say that they did not, put this power dirt, we'll call it power dirt, underneath their architecture? And some people have speculated that the temples or pyramids or whatever could be used as some sort of power source, or basing the power off of the earth, like ley lines and natural magnetism and stuff. Hypothetically, if they were to build that on top of this power dirt, I mean, what are we talking about at that point? Could they have been extracting energy from the dirt itself as well as the magnetic sphere of the earth? If they're creating dirt and terraforming deserts into the jungle, then I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that they might have known something back then that we didn't now. It's just very, very strange to think about going from that previous one to this one about the microbes. Ocean fungi from the Twilight Zone could be source of next penicillin-like drug. We've already discussed how antibiotic-resistant bacteria is becoming an issue, that our medications are inefficient or ineffective against bacteria, and that could basically end civilization as we know it. Because if you get a cut, fall down, scrape your knee, you get an infection, we don't have anything to treat that bacteria, then it's up to luck and God at that point. And that's not optimal. So we discovered a fungus that killed bacteria, and hopefully we can find more in the ocean. And this is not the surface of the ocean either. It's 200 meters to 1,000 meters below the Earth's surface. The Twilight Zone is home to a variety of organisms and animals, including specially adapted fish such as lantern sharks and kitefin sharks, which have huge eyes and glowing bioluminescent skin, which is super cool. Penicillin is an antibiotic that originally came from fungus called penicillium. So we might find something like that from these ocean fungi. The Twilight Zone is characterized by high pressure, a lack of light, and cold temperatures, which presents an extreme environment where fungus might exhibit unique adaptations that could potentially lead to new discovery of species with biochemical properties. You know what else I've talked about on this podcast already, which is funny? Twilight Zone, like temperatures, lack of light, all that stuff that I just described, it's like Europa. That's what I was just describing the other day, what we're probably going to find. So maybe we can find some good bacteria, fungus killing bacteria on Europa. The new Ocean DNA catalog launched on Tuesday contains more than 317 million marine organism gene groups. I'm pretty sure that's what that means. The advances in technology means existing samples can provide much more data than before. The marine biotechnology sector, which relies on an ocean organisms and their genes, is worth an estimated $6 billion, a figure expected to almost double by 2032. Okay, if genes of the fish in the ocean are so expensive, then why are we just like plowing through them all? They've almost all been extinct at this point, like if they're that valuable, why are we murdering them? That was just a random thought. But Liolo was surprised to see so many fungus living in the ocean's twilight zone. There have been some indications of it, a fungus abundance at this level before, so this is another piece of the puzzle. Another critical discovery made during the cataloging process, says scientist, professor, senior author of the study, was the role viruses played in boosting gene diversity. The viruses insert themselves and move along genes from one organism to another. That means viruses create genomic biodiversity that accelerates their diversity and evolution. Wow. That's a big twist. One result of the acceleration, he said, were genes that had evolved to enable organisms to chew through plastic. They can degrade synthetic polymers derived from hydrocarbons, which are very recent as a pollutant in the ocean, showing that evolution happened in the past decades. My mind just got blown. Waboom. Bacteria learned to chew through plastic in the last couple of decades? Well, thank God. The catalog also highlighted gaps in our understanding of the ocean floor. It's easier to sample the water than the ocean floor, and that's what we underline in the paper, is the need to increase studies targeting the seabed in the future. Currently, 10 nations own 90% of our marine gene patents. The benefits are not being shared. Wow. 10 nations, 90% of the patents not being shared. Changes to ownership rules are being made, however. Since October last year, a new treaty came into force that says those that discover a marine gene own it, but they have to share the benefits. The problem is how do they share the benefits going forward? They still haven't figured out how the sharing will work. That's funny. All right, and fossils locked away for 1.75 billion years, 1.75 billion years, hold clues about the key moment in Earth's history. The earliest direct evidence of photosynthesis has been discovered in fossils dating back to 1.75 billion years ago. Scientists believe that cyanobacteria first emerged 2 to 3 billion years ago, before evolving to be capable of oxygen producing or oxygenic photosynthesis. In a study published in January 3rd in the Journal of Nature, researchers revealed the cyanobacteria fossils featured photosynthetic structures known as thylakoid membranes, which contain pigments like chlorophyll that convert light into chemical energy via photosynthesis. The cyanobacteria were preserved in a mud clay that was compacted over time to become rock. These researchers used a technique called transmission electron microscopy to see the membranes and other tiny details preserved in the fossils. Chavot said identifying the exact time in which cyanobacteria evolved in the ability to produce oxygen is an important milestone in Earth's natural history. The concentration of oxygen in Earth's atmosphere rose dramatically around 2.45 billion years ago, known as the Great Oxidation Event. The rise in atmospheric oxygen transformed life on Earth. It's unlocked aerobic respiration for life forms and increased the rate at which minerals weathered and provide nutrients to different environments. However, scientists don't know whether the Great Oxidation Event was triggered by the evolution of oxygenic photosynthesis or whether other ecological or geological events occurred first. So we were talking about the volcanoes earlier, and they don't know if that has something to do with it, or if it was some animals figuring out what to do to create oxygen, and that changed the entire Earth. The fact that we don't know that is very interesting. The exact biological and physical drivers of the great oxidation event are deeply debated among scientists, though cyanobacterial photosynthesis is generally accepted as the key reason why oxygen concentration increased. Drivers like volcanic eruptions or a decreased level of iron in the oceans may have also played a part. So we have a fun one here. These plants and animals might be the first to colonize Mars. For humans to live on Mars, the planet will have to be terraformed or made more Earth-like. This won't be done all with machinery and engineering. Instead, hardy plants and animals will remove carbon from the atmosphere, release oxygen, and add organic matter to the soil. It may take centuries, but eventually something approximating our Earth could result. So, growing plants on Mars will be difficult. The sunlight there is only 44% of the intensity we receive on Earth. The soil is bone dry, lacks organic material, and has twice as much iron as Earth's soil. Plus, it's laced with poisonous perchlorates. I don't know how to pronounce that. Chemicals that are used in explosives on Earth. This means Mars colonists will grow their food in greenhouses with soil augmented with chemical fertilizers and compost waste. Experiments have shown Mars-like soil could grow vegetables. The ones that do especially well in Martian conditions are onions, sweet potatoes, carrots, garlics, dandelions, hops, and basil. Peas and spinach do not do well because of the temperature of the greenhouse. Russet potatoes grew well only in soil substantially supplemented with materials to aerate it, and the taste was the same you'd find as local produce aisle. 2022, NASA found alfalfa is a forage crop that can be grown for our pets and stuff like that. Wild herbivores will thrive on it. As far as meat goes, current technology already allows for printing meat fillets from lab-cultured meat cells. In the future, this will likely become a sustainable food source for people on Earth and in space. So that's pretty interesting that they would just be printing their steaks. Earth's atmosphere is 78.1% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. Mars is only 1.9 nitrogen and 96% carbon dioxide. And one way to shift that balance would be hardy plants through photosynthesis. They will convert light, water, and carbon dioxide into oxygen and energy. Nitrogen is also super important for fertilizer, but I'm sure that they will figure that out. And the only place on Earth that gets as cold as Mars regularly is Antarctica. And then obviously tardigrades will live anywhere. But as far as terraforming Mars, terraforming seems nearly impossible from today's perspective, and that's legitimate. We don't have expertise, technology, or resources to do it. But the advances we may see in another century or two of AI-assisted technological leaps may bring the impossible into reach. So already, I use AI, and it will talk about terraforming and give you tons of ideas on terraforming. I can post some of those conversations I've had with AI about terraforming. That might be fun. It might be a fun episode to even just go through that one time. That kind of gives me an idea. But colonists will probably use synthetic replacements for nearly every plant or animal-based product we use on Earth. But people will still have the desire to see and use some of the natural things previous generations had on Earth. Scarce natural products will be extraordinarily valuable luxuries if the future economies continue to operate on principles of supply and demand. Here are some candidates for useful and beautiful plants to take with us to Mars. Bamboo. Bamboo is incredible. It grows quickly, makes a good windscreen, and has tender shoots that are edible for people and plants, and makes beautiful wood sources for practical and creative applications. 2, coffee. Some people think they can't live without coffee. This will be a luxury product colonists may want to cultivate and then ship back to Earth. Starbucks could finally live up to its name, it says. That's a funny joke. Red maples. Early settlers in American plains bemoaned the lack of shade and made it a priority to plant trees. On Mars, deciduous trees with broad leaves will be well suited for photosynthesis. Maple trees are fast growing and provide deep shade, are hardwood species harvested by flooring and furniture that can be made into pulp for paper. Zinnias, I don't know how to pronounce that. Zinnias, I think, NASA has conducted successful experiments to grow these flowers in space. They come in different sizes and variety of colors, are hardy and tolerant of neglect, and attract pollinators like bees and butterflies. Speaking of bees and butterflies, what animals will Mars colonists bring to their new home? Alpacas, these smaller versions of llamas living in the high Andes, have padded feet instead of hooves so they won't tear up the plant and soil. They don't drink as much water or need as much food. Their wool is hypoallergenic, soft, and high demand for woven clothes. If you chose to eat the meat, it is highly nutritious. Cats and dogs. While it's not much of a leap of the imagination to assume people won't continue their relationship with animals, they have been domesticated to live in symbiosis with us since prehistoric time. Yeah, everybody's going to want to bring their cats and dogs. I bet it's not going to be any large breeds, though. It's going to all be chihuahuas and cats on that flight over there. Chickens are useful for the eggs and meat. They're relatively easy to raise and will be a food source not only for people, but for any future carnivores released on the planet. Future carnivores released on the planet. That's a thought. Releasing carnivores onto the planet we just made. Honeybees. We'll need some pollinators for our flowers and crops for sure. Honeybees can get the job done and create that sweet, sweet honey while we're at it. I thought that article was really fun. It did give me a lot to think about. Okay, so it's running a little bit longer than I had wanted to, but there was just so much that happened this week, so it's all right. I hope that you guys are having fun sticking through here, and we're going to try to finish up and speed through the rest here. California-based developer Pattern Energy just closed on an $11 billion contract for a massive wind and transmission project in New Mexico and Arizona. I just thought this was really cool because it's so huge. And it's Danish wind turbine manufacturer Vestas is making the order, and they also announced that it was the biggest order they had ever done for the United States, and that it is final commissioning expected for 2026, and there's over 2,000 people working on it, and $11 billion. That's a lot of money. And similarly, we've got some good news in these magic balls that are being produced that the United States will soon have, hopefully, and that have increased power line capacity by 30% in Europe, and that they save money because they can control the temperature, line, current, and other key metrics, and that it's going to be used to ensure better use of our energy system. So that's really exciting, that we're still investing in our energy system, and that these things should be revolutionizing the U.S. at an unrivaled scale, it says. So we'll see. I'm going to keep my ears to the ground about this one. I just thought I would mention it. It says that the sensors can operate in minus 40 degrees up to 248 degrees. So that's pretty cold. And then on this one, we have The Guardian, which I really like The Guardian. But it says, it only takes one for it to be real. What if it changes humanity forever? UFOs, talking about UAP, UFO. And there's a lot of technical details in this. I just wanted to skip down to the end here and read this one particular part of this. This is a really good article you should go and check out. We don't have the time to read all of this, and like I said, it's pretty detailed. So what caught my eye was, more recently, a team found 3 bright stars on a plate dated 19th of July, 1952, that have since vanished. Provocatively, this date is burned into the diaries of UFO enthusiasts around the world because it coincides with the famous incident which pilots and radar operators saw lights they could not explain above the skies in Washington, D.C. And this is a quote: I think it's very important to do this kind of nearby searching for extraterrestrial objects because the astronomical community mostly looks for things that are very far away. I think it's time for us to do something new, says Valerierol, who is now working to establish the ExoProbe project to look for anomalous objects among the vast number of human satellites in orbit. But what happens if she or anyone else uncovers irrefutable proof of non-human intelligence that have visited the world or visiting Earth? So just hypothetically, what would happen if this person did find it? A few years ago, physicist John Priestland, who runs an engineering consultancy, found himself wondering what this would mean to us as individuals. If there's something here to disclose, and I'm very conscious that there are a lot of people who will be affected, and there isn't an entity out there, as far as I can see, that is putting the people first. So he set up Unhidden, a charity dedicated to decreasing the stigma associated with discussing UAP and non-human intelligences and the possibility that the evidence is being covered up by the government, or governments, plural. It's a mission that Stubbings agreed with. There's still a stigma around this topic. People are so frightened about discussing it, but it only takes one account for it to be real, and it changes the narrative of human history forever. So all it takes is one of these experiences to be true. This is why the Disclosure Act was seen as important, and his altered vision is such a disappointment, even potentially dangerous. These days, it's all about truth. Except for the people who happen to see things in the sky, we don't legitimize their truth. He said they need help and support, and we need to do that in the context of possible disclosure, because there might be suddenly 8 billion people who have to get used to the fact that they're being told that there's a very different worldview by the exact organizations that they now realize have lied to them for the past 80 years. So, whoa, I mean, that was a whole lot to digest there in a very short amount of time. But I just wanted to give some light to this charity that dedicated to decreasing the stigma associated with UAPs, Unhidden. I'm going to have to look more into that. But, yeah, I mean, if we want to know the truth, then we can't stigmatize people. And if people are having real experiences, all it takes is one for this to be absolutely game breaking. So I just wanted to give that thought out there for anybody who hasn't thought about it. With all of this news about aliens and UAPs in the news for the past 7 years now, all it takes is one of these experiences to be real, and it changes everything. And that kind of really changes the concept of it. And so very quickly, we're just going to note that Venus is the only planet that spins clockwise. It's like it's upside down compared to the major players in the solar system. The reason is unclear, but a new proposal sees Venus capturing then destroying a moon. So they have all these endless computer models that they do, like math equations that show all the trajectories of the planets throughout time and of our solar system, and none of them can really make sense of Venus. But apparently there was a new one that came out that shows that a moon stabilized and then slowed the planet's rotation, and this hypothetical moon did more than that. The moon was captured by Venus, and the research duo looked at the hundreds of thousands of simulations that they had found that the scenarios they deemed both plausible with the power to explain the properties of Venus today. First of all, the moon captured would have had to been in retrograde. This means that the moon was going around Venus in the opposite direction. The assumption is that Venus was spinning the same direction as other planets. This motion of the moon would have created tides that slowed down Venus's spin. As long as the moon could stick around for over 10,000 years, which is easier said than done, because the Venus is close to the sun. So how did it not get pulled into the sun? But hypothetically, if that moon existed, it could have reversed Venus's rotation, apparently. The scenario is not the only one that has set out to explain why Venus orbits the way it does. A backward day from our point of view, extremely slowly. It takes 243 days for Venus to do a single pirouette on its axis. I guess that's rotation. Other suggestions for the weird spin relate to gravitational interactions with the sun and the effects of its thick atmosphere and major impacts similar to the one that forced Uranus to orbit on its side. The study is published by the journal Universe. So that's just incredible, but what fascinated me particularly about this is that it is such a weird planet. We've talked about Venus previously on this podcast, and yeah, it's just an outlier, and I wanted to mention those things because I didn't even know Venus rotated opposite than all the other planets. So call me an idiot regarding Venus, but I did not know that. Thanks for sticking it out to the end if you have, guys. I know this was a longer episode. This was just, there was a lot of stuff that came out this week, and I really wanted to talk about it all. It was all exciting, really mind-provoking, thought-provoking type of stuff that was on here. If you liked it, I would really appreciate any sort of tip to Patreon or whatever. I have to take time out of work to do this, so that would really help. I also am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the social medias, all of the podcast apps. Also, there's YouTube videos if you want to check out the pictures. I put out art on Facebook and Instagram. Check out some of my art. I do all sorts of stuff. Leave a comment. You can email me at inspiredearthpodcast@gmail.com. It's just the regular spelling. Or message me on Facebook or whatever. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And I can't wait to talk to you later. There's some more stuff that's happening. There's always more stuff that's happening, so I can't wait to talk to y'all later. Be safe, everybody.